I am Dialogist and welcome to Book 101. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He is the author of Earn the Sunrise, no other than Mr. Scott Hoffman.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate that.
Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Scott.
Oh, thank you. So appreciate you having me on. I'm Scott Hoffman. I wrote Earn the Sunrise. And let's see about a little bit about myself. I used to be a programmer, computer programmer. I'm still in the IT world. I mostly am in sales now. And I wrote some nonfiction, and I've always wanted to write a fiction book. And the idea for Earn the Sunrise came to me about 20 years ago. Never really thought I could write fiction, and but I sat down and tried it, and ended up publishing it. So,
Congratulations for your debut novel.
oh, thank you.
What's the big difference of being a programmer or writing a novel?
That's a good question. So, the being a programmer, usually everything you do is tied to a business requirement, whereas writing a novel, you are able to expand your design far beyond what any. I guess the thing is, you're not constrained by reality. You have that's what I truly love about it, is the fact um, I can take something, an idea, a concept, and I can expand upon it to make it interesting. And uh, I guess the only goal is you have to sit down and think about what your reader is experiencing and try and think of ways to keep them captivated with the story. Mix that, um, design a world or a circumstance that compels them to believe in the character of the story, but doesn't go too far as to make them lose their suspension of disbelief. So that's about the biggest difference to me. Programming was an art for me for a while, but you're always constrained by reality, and usually you're coding up something boring. So
Very well said, Mr. Scott. So, what age do you realize that you're good in writing a novel?
well, I don't know that it. So I wrote it kind of late in life. I'm in my 50s right now. I wrote my first book back when I was about in my 30s, but that was a nonfiction book. Um, the the thing that I think you get good when you apply yourself, and you think it through, and you test, and you study. I started listening to, I read books about writing by Orson Scott Card. I Brendan Sanderson has he publishes on YouTube his videos of his classes that he teaches on writing, creative writing, and I studied those, and I read about how other people write, other authors write, and so I sat down and just started doing it. That's really, I think, what it comes down to, is that when you uh, yeah, I'm not really sure. When you, I guess when you do it right, when you're motivated to finally do it. So,
Definitely. I learned from your Amazon profile that you are adventurer.
oh yeah, yeah. In fact, I appreciate you bringing it up, because that did play a large role in the experiences I had with the Boy Scouts, taking them on high adventure outings that led to a lot of the parts within Earn the Sunrise. The my both my boys joined scouting, and I always wanted to. Well, they wanted to, and the troop wanted to, and I wanted to be able to experience more than just what you do when you say go car camping. We wanted to do more of the more technical, lightweight, difficult outings. And yeah, they're all out of scouting now, but that was I've gotten kind of old to do that type of stuff. But yeah, it was a very big, it provided a very big impact on, um, my understanding and an inspiration to a lot of the scenes within Earn the Sunrise.
Do you think in the future you will write academic book about your adventure?
I don't think I will, because I don't know, I say that now, but I've thought about writing a nonfiction book about how to do camping, how to do it. But there's a lot of books out there already, so I probably won't. I'll probably just stick to writing fiction, and maybe I'll pull from some of my experiences in future books. But I don't think I will, though. Write any more about or write about my particular adventures.
Yes, so let's talk about your debut novel, Earn the Sunrise. What behind the title of your debut novel?
Sure. So a big part of the novel is that the main characters, a few of the main characters, the young people in the story, um, are experiencing like they both of them experienced a form of loss of sort, a challenge to their worldview, to their life, and the boy Colin is he in particular was fairly weak, and he didn't have a strong, what's the best way to put it? He didn't have a real. He always took the easy way out. He tended to. He was going through life, and he had some problems in his life, and so one of the other main character, his mentor, I modeled after a real life person named Jocko Willink, and he is always challenging him to do more, to use more, to have more self discipline in his life, and to exercise, and to do to challenge himself to do something more. And so he would always get up early in the morning, and he used the term, he would start running or working out or doing something in order to earn the sunrise. So that's where the title came from.
Yes, interesting indeed. Earn the Sunrise. How did you crafted it?
So how did I craft it? I had this idea from years ago about um, making something where you have a story about Boy Scouts or young people getting put into a scouting type situation, but it's not a normal scouting situation. In particular, Colin is sent there because he can't make it in a juvenile home, and he's given this last chance. And there's a number of places where if they've been sending young people who are in juvenile homes to wilderness camps. And so I kind of modeled it after that. And I said, well, what would like, how would they, how would you get out of this? What's the benefit? To the person going there, what's their motivation to try and follow the rules? And I just thought to myself, well, maybe I'd put a twist on it. And that is, in scouting, in order to, I guess, complete your tenure as a scout, you can earn the eagle rank, become what's known as an Eagle Scout. And you would do that by performing some type of a project that benefits the community. So in the case of Earn the Sunrise, their projects are performing forms of rescue. They do hostage rescue. They work on contract from police departments, small police departments that don't have a SWAT team or anything like that. So these boys, they're sent to the camp. They learn a number of defensive moves through Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Krav Maga. And then in order to earn freedom when they get to be 18, they can do their Eagle project, if you will, by performing a rescue. So That's a lot of the story revolves around that, and then of course there's a romantic aspect where um, a girl, another one of the main characters, Avery, is she's sent there for a different reason though. She wasn't sent there because she was a juvenile delinquent, but it was considered to be a place of protection because her family was her father was a prosecutor and he was going after a syndicate, and they murdered her parents. So she, the people that knew her parents wanted to protect her, and the only way they could think of protecting her was to get her out of the system, out of the spotlight. So they were friends with the guy running the camp, and they sent her to one of the camps. So I don't want to give away too much, but that's basically the underlying part of the story and what happens. And then of course it follows through some of the storyline of Colin and Avery. They meet up and while they're camping and along with their troops, and lots of interesting things happen after that. So
Yes, interesting indeed. So, Earn the Sunrise. What are your struggles in writing it?
I think my biggest struggle was that I had never written fiction before. So I was trying to make sure that I wasn't sounding too stifled or stodgy. I wanted to write dialogue that was believable. I was trying to get into the mind of my characters. I was trying to be dynamic but make a story that was believable. There were parts where, oh, like I wanted to make the characters definitely sound their age, and sometimes you have to weigh, you can't, like, for example, as you can imagine, you can't sit there and write a character who's 17 years old and always make them sound like a 17-year-old, because that could get irritating or boring, or you know what I'm saying. So a lot of times you'll you'll curtail the dialogue to make it sound more interesting or cool, or but at the same time you want to make sure you don't make them sound too adult like. So that was a lot of what I was trying to go back and forth on. I was trying to make them keep the character interesting, yet also make them sound like they should for their age.
Yes. So, let's talk about the main character of the novel. What can you say about it?
So I would say the main character is Avery. Um, Avery was a victim. Uh, she was very young. She was 12 when her parents were killed, and she was sent to the camp. The camps generally have older kids in them, so she was sent to a girls' camp, and the camp leader reluctantly took her in because she understood that she needed protection, and because she started training to learn Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and these fighting techniques at a very young age, she actually became very good at it. And so, as she's there for 5 years, 6 years, and so she became one of the best fighters there. And so, she's still um, she's small in stature, but because of her technique, she's able to deal with some larger and more aggressive opponents. Um, so the story follows her transformation, going from somebody who was uh, lost everything in her life with her parents and her home, to now being thrust into this weird situation where she's with a bunch of basically juvenile delinquent girls who are at this camp and doing this hostage rescue thing, and then she gets really good at it. And but she's different because she's not there as a prisoner. She's there as basically a guest, as someone that is living amongst them, but she's trying to keep that a secret. And then she meets Colin, who is from the boys camp, which is a few miles away, and there's a bit of interest there that develops between the two of them, but she's also interested in trying to lead a normal life, and so she's struggling with what happens with can I actually go back to it, and there's some the story shows that maybe the syndicate's gone, and but then there's a things change, and she realizes there's a new danger, she needs to address it, and then she gets caught, and she gets needs some help, and that's where sometimes her pride gets the best of her, and Colin is there, and so the story kind of goes through this the how both these two young people change. For her, she's a person that was made stronger from a tragedy in her life, whereas Colin is made stronger because he was just screwing up basically as a high school kid, and then he ends up getting thrust into this situation where he experienced loss of his family, but it was a different type of loss. So the two find some affinity, and then they go and they I don't want to give away too much, but in short, they overcome some obstacles, and they fortunately, the story does have a happy ending. I'll just say that. So
Yes, happy ending, people. So why there is olive and arrow? Is this expandable novel?
yeah. So it is a part of a series, and that kind of comes out at the end of the story. You begin to learn more about the mentor and what he's doing. So as a result of that, the story does end, and I'm writing the next novel in the next. I'm writing a story that picks up where this one ends. And the Olive and Arrow is an organization that Colin's mentor started, and I'll just say he was a retired Navy SEAL, and he earned the Medal of Honor. And as a result of this, this great medal that he earned, he was able to develop some contacts high up in politics. And so one of the things that he had wanted to do, this is fairly obscure, but he always wanted to get a letter of marque and reprisal. In the U.S. Constitution, the Congress can write a letter of marque and reprisal, which gives somebody the ability to basically commit acts of piracy on behalf of the U.S. government. So he was able to do that, and that's the organization known as the Olive and Arrow. So that's why it's part of the whole series, and the story kind of picks up along that. The next story will pick up with our main characters being a part of this organization.
How many series did you plan to do this novel?
So I had planned on about 3 or 4. I didn't have I have a clear ending that I wanted to do, and I have a few different challenges that I wanted to write about. Right now, I'm currently in the middle of writing the next story, which involves there are characters going off and trying to help it was based on the real life circumstance where the Nigerian girls in Chibok, Nigeria, were kidnapped by Boko Haram. And back around 2014, and so they're going to be working to try and help them. So that's the story I'm working on right now. There's probably a couple others, but the thing was, I didn't really have a distinct and number. I have a number of different challenges that I was going to write novels about with them, but I didn't have a distinct, like laid out plan of each and every novel and challenge that there was. I do know how I want to end it, so I figured what I would do is write the stories and I guess either when I decide to take on a new project, or maybe when it seems like I've exhausted um, the story, then I was going to finish it with the ultimately the ending with the characters that I was looking for.
Very well said, Mr. Scott. So before we go on, I want to shout out to the people listening in the United States, most especially in the state of Colorado. In Denver, I got 96% audience share. Colorado Springs, Fruita, Inglewood, Aurora, Little Layton, Broomfield, Brighton, Arvada, Grand Junction, Glenwood Spring, Loveland, Commerce City, Steamboat Springs, Montrose, Greeley, Longmont, and last but not the least, Breckenridge. Thank you for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers all over the world, like Mr. Scott Hoffman. Mr. Scott, who are your favorite authors?
So I really like Hemingway, Tom Clancy, Vince Flynn. They're some of my bigger inspirations for the action stuff. Um, I really liked Brendan Sanderson, so I do enjoy Sanderson and Tolkien. So I do enjoy the fantasy novels, although I don't know, there's so much of them out there now. I'm kind of getting sick of them. But and then I was really heavily influenced by Melville and Poe, Hawthorne. So from more of a classic American um, area. And even in nonfiction, I really I really love military and intrigue type stories that are because if the story is really good, it can inspire some great fiction. And so I really liked. I learned a lot by listening to Jocko Willink, and I read some of his works. Richard Marcinko, who was um, a Navy SEAL, had some incredible life story. And then Charlie Beckwith, who wrote about Delta Force. So I'd say that, just in general, that's a lot of what inspired me. The Bible, of course, as well. A lot of, definitely for sure that was also plays a big role in a lot of my writing.
So, if you describe those writers in two adjectives, what are they?
Well, I would say that for Hemingway, the guy had an amazing life story. He came up with a new way of, I think, of writing the action adventure genre. I know that people are awfully critical of him, but there's so much of what I read in him that I see in the modern action thriller movie. And Tom Clancy, I really liked him as well because his stories weren't just all guns and glory. It was there was usually some intellectual aspect to it. So with the older stories like Poe, one of my favorite stories by Poe was the Golden Bug, or Gold Bug, I think is what it's called. And it's just an interesting story, very intellectual in terms of it's an investigation. A lot of people, when they think of Poe, they think of dark, poetry and things like that. But he actually wrote a number of other things that were very fascinating. So I guess that's really all I can think of. I mean,
so do you think those adjectives, did you get it, or did you apply it in your writing?
So I tried, yes. When you read Earn the Sunrise, I did not. It is an action thriller, and there is a lot of violence and fighting, but I tended to try and focus more on having these characters try and achieve results without doing a frontal assault, right? Like you're not going to see, there are some of the fights and some of the violence are described, but I focus more on the characters trying to think out ways of not, dealing with a problem through aggression per se. Uh, there's a lot of intrigue about that. So I did try and put, some of the Clancy-like intrigue in place. And Brendan Sanderson, I thought always had a great way of talking about fights. He always said you never want to do a blow by blow description of the fight. I do a little, but not much. He says what you really want to do is put the reader in the mind of each of the people fighting, like both the protagonist and the antagonist. What are they thinking? How are they addressing it? And then so I believe that I did a nice job of trying to get the reader into the mindset of what was happening when something dangerous or violent or a fight or something that is very stressful is happening, and what's going on in each character's mind.
Yes, and according to Mr. Justin Moore, great book, exciting read. Earn the Sunrise is well written and captivating book that takes readers on exciting journey filled with twists and turns. Wow. Congratulations, Mr. Scott. So what are the elements in the story that make your readers glued to it?
So I think that what will keep the readers glued to it is an investment in knowing or the characters. So my stories are very character driven. Yeah, you're going to you have characters who are experience a number of struggles. I think that my characters are also can be other people can commiserate with their experience in some ways, their challenges. So that I think that's part of it. I think the story also provides some. It's not a typical story, so I also include some spiritual aspects of it. So it's not just a situation where there's violence and romance. There's also challenges about right and wrong, and the characters struggle with some of that. Some characters struggle with. There is some Christian components in it. Not all the characters are Christian. There is. It's not a Christian book per se because there's cursing in it. There's a lot of things that would not normally be in a Christian book, but there are people who are. There are characters that are. So you've got some of this these conflicts that are occurring between characters that I think can be consistent with what people may consider relevant today. And so, as well as I also try and make sure that the challenges and the story, the problems that exist seem real to the reader. So I think that's what would keep my reader connected. And there's a little bit of there is some romance and a little bit of occasional teenage humor. So it is a young adult story, so you do get a little bit of that in there.
Oh wow! And according to A. West, neat premise and characters to root for. Take the warm, inspiring feel of Hallmark movies. Oh, do you think that your novel is a good for a movie or a series?
I think it is. I would agree. It is very. I mean, it is an action thriller, and there's a lot of scenes that would, probably do well on the big screen. So I think the other I wanted to. That was a big part of what I wanted to do as well. So I wanted to immerse the reader into environments in the wilderness. So you got a little bit of that going on, but you also got scenes that take place within the city in other places, and you've got some fairly interesting scenes with helicopters, and of course the hostage rescue that they perform, some of the adventures they go on. So I would think it would be very, very well suited for the big screen for because of that.
Yes. So, are you the writer to plan first before you go to the deep end of the story?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say, my method is to do a little bit of both. What I find myself doing is I do create an outline, and I try and make it as detailed as possible. I try and think of the conflicts and what I expect to happen, and I also create a dossier of every character and their motivations, and then I sit down and I start to write. And when I write, I don't usually follow the outline. So I'll start to I'll put my mind into the scene or the character, and I'll think, yeah, that's great, but they would say this or they would think that. And I just start it starts to flow through my mind, what could happen. And I mean, I'm kind of close, but usually I do change it up a bit, and I'll probably revise it maybe another, at least 5 times, it seems like. I think I wrote 13 revisions on Earn the Sunrise.
So you are a combination of being a gardener and are an architect. Because one of my guests, Steve Thread, he usually do as a gardener. He just write and write and write, and then arrange in the later. And then he wrote lots of like 19 novels. And do you think that is one of the good effects of being a gardener as a writer?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think that's a good depiction, and I've heard those analogies used before, and I am a combination of both. The you're right in that the downside, or some people view it as, I view it as a downside. I did cut out a lot of material, and that material I've kept, and I was thinking of producing another novelette from it, or a possible novel. But when you're a gardener like that, that's what happens. You can create you might end up writing a bunch of stuff that you end up stripping out later on.
So, what are your goals, short term goals and long term goals in writing?
So my short-term goals are to I want to finish the next book in this series, and then I was going to write another book, which I've already outlined, that is not part of this series. It would be a completely different story, and it was going to be more of um, an adult level I would call it more like, probably a uh, psychological thriller, but it would have some action and romance in it. But in the short term, though, I want to finish this book that I'm writing, the next one in the series of the Olive and Arrow series. That's the Sambisa Forest Rescue in Nigeria.
Wow, crossing my finger that all your goals in life will be come true, Mr. Scott. So before we go on, I'm inviting you to listen to my other podcast, Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower musicians, singers, or all the people, let's say, legendary in music industry. And listen to my latest episode with Mr. Rick Delarada, one of the finest singer and pianist in terms of jazz. So please do listen. Music 101. Plus one more. It's already spring, people. So please do have a copy of my Spring Flowers. Is available on Amazon and leading online bookstores worldwide. So, Mr. Scott, you are indie or a traditional publishing?
So my first book, the nonfiction, was traditional, uh, but that was many years ago. I wrote this one as an indie author, though.
So, what do you think is the big difference of being traditional or indie?
So I would say the biggest difference is that with indie, I can reach out directly without following the rules. Uh, Traditional publishers are always going to want something that is like the last big thing, but just a little bit different. And so and it takes a long time to get published, and you don't have a lot of control, especially if you're not a well established author. Like, for example, this is my first nonfiction book, so I wouldn't have a lot of control over. I mean, I can write the story, and I can, I'm saying I can put uh, I can make it go the way I want it to go, but I probably, if I had gone tradition, there probably would have been a lot of things in this book that would have got cut out. Uh, and and it wouldn't have had anything to do with trying to make the story flow faster. It would have probably had more to do with sensibilities of certain organizations, or what they know that it would take to put it into a particular bookstore. So but on the other side of it, traditional publishers, they tend to do, I think, well, they actually do something with the book, but like in terms of marketing it, well, or you would hope. I don't know. Then again, I've been reading some horror stories about other authors who did get traditional contracts, and then they write a book, and then the publisher, maybe there's different people in charge, or maybe it got sold or changed hands, and then it's someone else's project at that point, and then the person in charge doesn't care about it. They don't promote it. They don't try and help it. So, but then you're stuck with that press. So I don't know. I kind of think nowadays maybe going the indie route is the best way, but you do have to work hard to market yourself, and I think that's the biggest downside of being a indie publisher.
Yes. So, Earn the Sunrise as your debut novel. What did you learn from it?
I learned a great deal about the process. So although I had written a book before, it was many years ago, and it was traditional publishing, and then my role in that was I would write, and then I'd have these editors basically correct my writing. But I never, it's like I never really was part of all of the minute details about everything from cover to getting it out there into Amazon, or the every aspect of this whole project I had to learn and know and develop. I did for it I had to do the layout, you name it. There's just every part of this along the way. You either have to hire someone to help you, or you have to do it yourself. And so I learned a lot in that. I learned a lot about writing. Like I had mentioned before, I came from a scientific computer background. I'm an engineer by education, and so I didn't have that. My writing was I guess oriented toward that type of environment. So, when I moved into fiction and I wrote this book, I had to challenge myself to develop a completely different writing style. I had to start to think about things, bigger picture things that I hadn't really ever considered before in my other writing. So I learned a lot about it in the process. I'm really quite excited about writing more. I think, because of these challenges, and the other aspect of it is just thinking about trying to make a story, and keeping your reader entertained is just, I think, a very difficult level of design work that I guess it's to me, it's like designing anything, like a computer program, or a design that I would have done when designing something, like an implementation of software. But yet in the world of fiction, you have the ability to just come up with so many intangible things. You got characters that are imperfect, or they don't always know what truth is or understand. They're confused and angry. You got emotions that are happening. You got conflicts that are sometimes valid. There's just so many different things that make it so that you have to really think things through. And so I learned a lot about trying to make a story compelling to the reader, trying to keep them interested. Just a big challenge all the way around that I really found intellectually very challenging.
So are you the writer that easily for you to name your characters?
No, I don't think so. I did a lot of research and thinking about the character names. Part of it is well, when I write fiction, the thing that I'm always thinking about is I want to try and keep it somewhat tied to reality, but the reality is people don't want to read about normal people. They want, you want to read about exceptional people. So you have to, move between this line of trying to keep the suspension of disbelief with your reader, but yet also be able to give them something that they want to see, that they want to see in a person. And I think that's even down to the names. So I would use names that would, I think that people may like, so for example, that I had to pick names that I thought were common with the age range of these characters at the time period that the novel takes place. And then there were other names I picked that were just based on, like if the character was somebody that maybe was a protagonist, I might give them a less flattering sounding name. So that was a lot of what I went into picking the names. So I was trying to pick popular and unpopular names, or names that were consistent with the time period of the characters, but yet cool or interesting.
The writer that you balance the villain and the hero of your character?
So in Earn the Sunrise, the my heroes are definitely good guys, and the bad guys are, I try and make the reader somewhat understand where they're coming from. I'm not saying that they're not, like, I don't like making it so that the the good guys are somewhat bad. They're just imperfect. And then the bad guys in the story they're definitely imperfect, but I do try and give the reader, I try and give a little bit of background, a little bit of understanding to the villain, because I personally, I never like stories where the villains are so one dimensional. I think that's poor writing, poor storytelling. The typical, what's the metaphor that I see is people refer to them as the twisty mustache, villain that you used to see in cartoons from years ago. That's not what I have. So my villains, they definitely do bad things, and but I think the reader will have some understanding as to what their motivations are, and understand why they might be doing what they're doing.
Yes, very well said, Mr. Scott. And thank you, Player FM, for being on the top 5 best book review podcast. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Scott, can you please invite our listeners to buy your book?
Oh, sure. No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate all those in Colorado listening. Beautiful state. Like you mentioned, all those towns and cities. But if you want, Earn the Sunrise is currently available at Amazon. If you have a Kindle, the Kindle Unlimited, then you can read it. You don't have to pay anything more than what you're already paying, but it's available as a paperback or as an ebook on Amazon.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Scott because if you support him, he will give his best and more books to come, right, Mr. Scott?
Right on.
Yes. And thank you for your time, Mr. Scott.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. I think this is a privilege. I appreciate being invited on. And definitely appreciate all the listeners out there for taking the time today to listen in.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Scott, for your time.
Oh, thank you, Daniel. Once again, I appreciate being invited on.
Welcome, people. See you soon.